Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today to this monthly Oracle Visual Builder Office Hour. This month, we're going to talk about the new features in Oracle Visual Builder and Visual Builder Studio that are starting to roll out in August, basically this month. It's basically version 23.10. My name is Shai Schmelzer. I'm part of the Oracle Product Management team, and with me is Blaine, also part of our product management team. During this session, if you have any questions, please post them on the Q&A panel, and we'll try to answer them either during the session or at the end of the session, depending on how things would flow. But don't wait with your question till the end, just post them on the Q&A, and Blaine is going to monitor those, and we're going to try and answer them during the session. All right, so before we talk about what's new in 23.10, I wanted to point out two things that you can take part in. The first thing is a new certification that you can get from Oracle University. It's called the Oracle Redwood Application Developer Certification, and that's a nice thing to add to your CV, to your resume, if you're dealing with Visual Builder, if you're dealing with extending Oracle Fusion apps. It's basically a certification from Oracle that you understand the material. It's basically an exam that covers both development in Visual Builder and Visual Builder Studio, as well as the Redwood design, template patterns, etc. Now, it comes along with an Oracle University training course that you can take that basically covers those topics. Of course, having practical experience with the product is also very helpful. And one of the key things to know is that you have 2 weeks still until the end of the month to actually take this exam and take the training for free. So Oracle has been running a little promotion for the past couple of months, offering you to take 2 free exams, certification exams that you can add to, again, to your knowledge base. And the training for this is also free. So for the next 2 weeks, you can get free training on Redwood, on Visual Builder. It's all online, so you just do it from your computer. And you can also schedule yourself to do one of those exams for free, as long as you do it before the end of the month. We have more information and all the links that you need on our blog. So if you go to blogs.oracle.com/VBCS, there's an entry there about the Redwood certification, and you'll get the link over there to Oracle University to take the training and register for the exam. So we highly recommend you take advantage of this opportunity. Again, 2 more weeks to do it. Then when we come to September, we have our big annual event, Oracle Cloud World, happening in Las Vegas during the week of September 18. And we have a lot of Visual Builder content over there, spread all over the week. We have multiple sessions that give you an introduction to the environment. We have hands-on labs. We have customer panels where other customers are going to share their experience of the application and solution that they built with Visual Builder. We have deep dive sessions by Oracle University. We're going to have presence in the demo ground area. There's a bunch of networking event over there and a lot more going on. If you're coming to Cloud World, if you're considering coming, if you scan the barcode over here on the right side, or if you go to the link that we have here, the bit.ly VBCW23, VB Cloud World 23, you're going to get a list of curated sessions that all deal with Visual Builder. And you'll see it's a full week of content that you can go just to learn about Visual Builder if you want to. There's, of course, a lot more going on in terms of other topics, other sessions that you can go into. A lot of partners are presenting there. It's a very lively event. If you get a chance, it's a great place to be to expand your horizons on everything that Oracle is doing and what we're going to do in the next year as well. So join us there. If you are at Open World, come over to our demo booth and say hello. We'll be happy to meet you. Both Blaine and I and a bunch of other product managers are going to be there. All right, so now let's talk about the new features in version 23.10. So version 23.10 started to roll out this month, and it's going to roll out to your server, depending on what environment you're using, over the next month, basically. right now, if you're using Oracle Integration Cloud, if you're marked as window 1 in terms of update, it's likely that you already got this version. If you are using Visual Builder standalone, it's probably going to be there in September if you're using wave 1 of the update cycle. And if you're using Visual Builder Studio, it's also going to appear there towards the end of this month or the beginning of September. Okay. You can know which version you're on if you just go to the top menu and you do help about. You'll see this area over here with the version number. Okay. With this version, we're also updating to using Oracle Jet version 14.1, and the Oracle VB runtime is 2310. Like with every version, we highly recommend that you update your application, especially if you're currently still in development stage, to use this latest release. It's very easy. You go over to the application setting, you'll have an upgrade button. You press that button and we'll upgrade you to use the latest versions of those runtime libraries. One thing to keep in mind, our upgrade policy, we actually updated our upgrade policy in 2307, and we extended it to support basically 4 releases, which are actually 2 VB server releases, but 4 VB Studio releases. So we are currently on a cadence of releasing Visual Builder Studio every 3 months, and the VB runtime server every 6 months, basically. So we are supporting back 4 versions. So in 2310, we will support 2310, 2307, 2304, and 2301. If you're using an older version, if you still want to design your application, you would have to upgrade in order to see the visual editor. Okay. A published application, we don't touch them. They can continue to run with the version they are on. But in any case, we always recommend to do an upgrade, because that would give you enhancement in terms of supporting new browser, security aspects, and many other capabilities in the development environment itself. Okay, so let's talk about the new features. So if you are using Visual Builder or Oracle Integration Cloud and you're not using Visual Builder Studio, then you missed on version 2307 feature. And one of the key things that we introduced in 2307 and that you are getting now is JavaScript action chains. So in the last office hours, we covered this. There's also a blog that shows you how this works. But basically, now, when you're creating new action chains, those are created as JavaScript instead of as JSON files. So up until now, it was using JSON format. You had this diagram format. Now we're switching to this block code view that you're seeing on the right side. It allows you it's much easier to see larger action chains this way. And the code that is actually generated behind the scene is actual JavaScript code. Okay. You still work with all the declarative action chains that you knew before, like things like assign variable or call REST service or call component or fire notification. All of those things still work. You just drag and drop them and position them as code blocks. But you can also switch to the code view and actually modify JavaScript code directly. It also simplifies aspects like assigning values to variables in the page. You don't need anymore to, like if you have a JavaScript code that does something and then you want to assign it to a variable, you can just write an assignment statement in there. You don't need to do an assign variable operation, even though you can do that if you want to. The biggest advantage of the JavaScript action chain is the debuggability of them. You can now use basically the debugging tools of the Chrome browser to set breakpoints, to examine values of variables. It makes it much easier to figure out if something doesn't work in your code, what's happening. Okay, just set a breakpoint, look at the variables, look at the flow of what your application is doing, using the regular development tools that your browser gives you. Okay. It's also easier to merge code changes if you're working with Git because it's actual code that you're merging. It's not JSON that you might not understand exactly what it's doing. And one more point to mention, you don't need to touch any of your existing action chains. They would still work as is. We're still supporting JSON action chains in terms of execution. And in fact, your JavaScript action chain can call your JSON action chain and invoke it if you need to. So no need to touch your existing code, but we highly recommend that every new action chain that you create would be JavaScript based. Again, there's a lot of advantage to it. Beyond that, all the new features that we're building all the new actions that we're building are only going to be available for JavaScript action chains going forward. So this is a great enhancement. Again, what you have here is a view of the breakpoint that you can set. Okay, so in the development tools, in Chrome, for example, you go to sources, you would see your action chains files over there. You can open them, set breakpoint at specific location, set watches on variable, examine variables, and more. Again, we have a blog that shows you a live demo of how to do all of those on our blog area. Okay. In 23.10, we enhanced the JavaScript development of action chains with a few features. One nice thing is we added the ability to do a surround with for an if statement or a try catch. So when you're working in the design view, you can click on an area, right click on it and choose surround with if statement or surround with try catch, and we'll create this structure for you. Also in the code insight area, we now have code insight into all the variables that you have in your environment. So for example, you can get code insight to see all the page variable, application variables, function, etc. Also note that you can use camel coding in order to get to things. So for example, if you start to type lower p and then an uppercase V, will go into page variables. Okay, so that's a very nice, easy way to get to your variables and access them. Also, because we have a lot of action chains, now declarative ones, we also allow you to switch the view of the action chains to be a list view instead of those big icons. So more of them fit into the page, into the view of the editor, and it's easier to drag and drop them into your block area. Another thing that we added in 2307, and again, you would be able to use now if you're on 2310, is tracking of a dirty variable status. So we can now automatically track if a variable was changed or not. It's done using this little property over here that you can set on a variable to indicate whether you want it to be tracked. Then we track it, and there's a variable that you can get or an action chain that you can invoke that returns to you whether the page is dirty or not. That's very useful if you want to create, for example, situations where you want to warn the customer about unsaved changes in the page. Again, since we added it in 2307, if you were using Visual Builder Studio, you already had access to this, and we have this blog that covers and shows you how to use it on our blog area. And of course, in the documentation, we also have a section about it. Another area that we've been enhancing in the latest versions is Fragments. So Fragments, if you're not familiar, is a way for you to create reusable pieces of user interface with business logic that you can reuse across your application in various locations. Okay. In the last release in 2307, we added the ability to add fragment parameters, so pass parameters to a fragment, and also created the design environment where you can design how those parameters would show up in the property inspector of a fragment. One key thing that we added in this new version is the ability to add fragment slots into your fragment. And a fragment slot basically indicates an area in your fragment where the consumer of the fragment can inject their own content. So this allows you to build kind of a surrounding area with whatever UI component and business logic you want, and allow the consumer of this area to put things inside this in places where you indicated that this fits, which makes it an ideal solution for creating things like templates for pages, or standard UI structures for areas in your page. So we internally inside Oracle, we are using this quite heavily in the Redwood designs and components. We basically use fragments now to create those reusable areas. And you can do the same thing, creating reusable aspects for your own team to use in your own application. And we'll see a demo of those things in a few minutes. Another change we did in 23.10 is that every service that you create now needs to be associated with a backend. So hopefully you're already familiar with this concept of backends. Backends define the server that you're connecting to, the type of connection you're doing, the type of authentication you're doing, okay? And you could have, up until now, you could have created those backends and then associated services with them. One advantage of backend is it makes it very easy to do changes, for example, switch the authentication type or the connection type across all the endpoints that access this server. The other advantage is, of course, backends together with application profiles allow you to switch the server that you're connecting to in different deployments of your application. For example, different backend for the test environment versus the production environment. Now, in 23.10, every service that you create needs to have a backend, okay, from now on. We made it very easy. As part of the service creation, we prompt you to create the backend. Okay, it's just one more step in the wizard. And also, when you're creating a new endpoint, we can recognize that it's using the same backend as something else that you created, another service you created, and will automatically help you associate that to that existing backend. This would keep your application much cleaner and would make it much easier to manage, again, across deployment into various environments. We did some enhancement to the audit pane. Again, some of those were introduced in 23.07. For example, the new tree view that shows you the audits in relation to a specific artifact in your application. And the summary of issues per an artifact. In 23.10, we also enabled you to specify, as you can see up here on the right side, whether you want to see all the artifacts, all the audit errors for all the artifacts, or whether you only want to see the errors for the artifact that you're currently working on. Okay, so that is a little bit more focused view of the audits and things that might be problematic in your code that you might want to fix. And this is what the audits are there for. And again, the audits are based on the best practices that we use internally for our development team. And you can feel free, if you don't like one of our audits, to just right click on it and say, ignore this audit. But in general, it helps you create better application, more accessible applications, applications that are ready for translation, and prevent things that are not correct in your code. So do pay attention to those audits. It also helps you with things like unused variables that you might have just lying there, and you might want to remove them just to keep your code cleaner. There's a bunch of other enhancements we did for the design time. One aspect is multiple undo. So there's the undo button up here. And now when you click on it, you can see all the actions you did in the past. And you can simply drag and drop and select which actions you want to undo. So if there's a bunch of things you did and you want to undo them, you don't need to press Control-Z until they're all done and guess at what point to stop. You can actually see what you did, and you can undo this thing in one go. You can undo multiple things. So that would help you roll back any changes you did that shouldn't have been done, or any mistakes you did while development. Another thing that we added in the application profile, we now have an area for IDCS details. This would help a lot of you that are deploying across multiple instances, multiple IDCSs, figure out which IDCS you're using when deploying the application. It's going to help you also when you're interacting with our support guys, telling them which IDCS instance you're using, so they can look into that one as well. And then one more thing we added, there's a VB before exit event, right? Trigger that you can have in your application. We now pass in a new payload into this event. The payload indicates what is causing this exit event from your page. So for example, is it that someone pressed the back button on the browser? Is it that someone clicked a navigation component in your page? So this can help you better handle those scenarios. So before you exit a page, know what to do and how to handle it. For example, do I want to show a save before exit thing, or do I just want to navigate to another page, things like that. Okay. So again, those are all enhancements in the UI. One more thing to mention, if you're not already using those, take a look at the Redwood components and templates that are offered by the Oracle design team. There's a new version of the Redwood starter template, version 23.10 that you can use. It uses, again, new Jet and VB runtime. It has a few new components and templates in there and a lot of enhancement to existing components. So the Redwood components can give you out-of-the-box capabilities beyond just nicer look and feel and a look and feel that matches the one that we're using. It gives you things like responsive user interface that adjust to smaller devices, support for accessibility, internationalization, a lot of things that can make your application look and function better. Have a look at the redwood.oracle.com site to learn about Redwood if you haven't. We also did a seminar about it in the past, and you might want to pick those up and use them. So I'm going to stop with the slides for a few minutes, and I'm going to show you some demos of the new features. Okay. So this is an example of one of our Redwood page template. This is the search template. Okay. And you can see it comes with an area where you can specify a title. You can switch between light mode and mixed mode over here. There's a slot over here for a search component and then an area for showing information. In my case, I'm showing information about movies. And if I go into live mode and I click on a specific movie, I want to show a pop-up that shows information about the movie. So one of the things we talked about is enhancement to fragments. And one of the things that I have over here in my component palette is a list of fragments that I can reuse. And one of those fragments is the movie info tile. And again, this is not a fragment that Oracle created. This is a fragment that someone else in my team created. Okay. And the minute that they created this fragment in the application, they can give me information over here on what this fragment does. I can bring this into my page and reuse it. Okay. Now this fragment has two parameters, an image and a title. So I can go over and I can map those parameters to variables in my page, for example, to the title of the movie and the image of the movie. Okay, so the poster of the movie. Oops, not the date. Sorry, the poster. All right, like that. So this is how I use the fragment. Now, the only problem with the fragment is that if I wanted to have more things in this pop-up and in this area, I don't have a way to do it because the fragment is with this structure. So the nice thing now is that we can go into fragments. Okay, so this is the fragment I was just using. And we can now choose to add a fragment slot to them. Okay, so I can, for example, add a little slot down here. I can give it a name, additional content, for example. Okay, and I can show a placeholder for it like that. Okay, and the minute that I did it in the source fragment, if the user is now going over and showing up the fragment, there's this place over here where they can drop their own things. So now I can go over here and drop whatever I want in this area. For example, I can take a text area, okay, and drop it into this additional content area, okay? And then I can say, for example, this is 5 rows. This is the overview of the movie, and I can also associate it with specific data, okay? Yeah, so let's see, maybe this movie doesn't have an overview. Let's see, Guardian of the Galaxy. Yeah, over here we do have an overview of what the movie is about. All right, so this is fragment slots. And again, this is a great way for you to create, for example, page template. So the way you go about it is you can say, hey, let's create a new fragment. We'll call it a page template, for example, or let's call it a tab page. Okay, maybe you want a template for a page that deals with tabs. You can say this is going to be used as a page template, and then you click create, and you just go into the visual editor. And over here, you can design whatever you want. You can bring your logo or things like that. You can bring in a heading, for example. Maybe we wanted to have some tabs, so let's add a tab bar over here. Okay, and you can say, I don't know, amp and depth and something else like that. Okay, and you can associate events here, so you can add the business logic for what happens on a selection. Okay, and by the way, this is the JavaScript action chain. So you can see when I create a new JavaScript, it automatically creates it in action chain. Again, you can switch the view of actions to a list view now. Makes it so you can see more action chains over here. Of course, you can filter at the top, and then you can start doing the same things you did before. You can call a REST service and then select the REST service you want to call. Okay, so for example, maybe I need to call a get movie. Okay, over here. Now, again, one of the new features I can do here is I can add, if I right click on it, I can say surround with an if statement. So I get a little if structure here. Okay. And over here, I can have my condition. Okay, so I can do if selection equals, for example, 1, something like that. So this is my if else statement. Yeah. And then maybe in some cases, I want to call some JavaScript code. So I can do a call function in an else structure over here. And then the function, I can define it. Okay, I can create a new function in the action chain. For example, say hello. Okay, and this is created as a say hello area over here. And over here, for example, I can fire another event. Okay, now all of this is, again, JavaScript. So if I switch to the code view, you would see JavaScript over here. And then, for example, if instead of selection here in my if statement, I want to check something else, I can do, for example, $, and I'm in a fragment. So I can look at fragment and look at the fragment variables, for example. Okay, so far we don't have a variable for fragment. So let me do the undo. Okay, so again, you can see multiple undos capabilities here. I can change the two last source things and get back my selection. Okay, this is the new undo capability. All right, back to the fragment. The fragment can have variables. So for example, I can say, hey, this heading that I have over here, I want to base it on a variable. So the heading would come from a new variable and call it page title. Okay, it's going to be an input variable and it's a required variable, and I'm going to click create. And I'm also going to give it a default value. Okay, like that. So now this is my page. My fragment has a variable now. It's an input variable. So in the fragment, there's this design time. And over here, I can say how things would show up on the design time. For example, I can say, hey, there's going to be a page title variable. I'm going to call it title for the page, give a description. We'll show at the top like that. Okay. So I just created this little template. I want people to be able to put stuff in the template. So I'm going to add a slot, a fragment slot in here. This can be the main area. Okay, and we'll do a placeholder. And I can add, for example, maybe there's another section here in the page that I need below this one. This is with a smaller title. I'll call it more info. And this would be another slot that I want in my application. We'll put another slot down here, and this would be more info, okay, with a default placeholder. All Right, so this is my page template now, which means that if I go now and I click plus to create a new page, okay, among all the templates that I have here, and by the way, those are the Redwood templates, okay, there are 13 of them now, okay, there's also my template over here. Now, you can see that the other templates have a lot more info. So one of the things you would want to do for your fragment is go into settings and provide this info, okay? We can call this one tab-based navigation, template with 2 content areas, okay? And you can also even switch the icon over here, okay? So maybe this would be the icon that I want to use, okay? Now, when someone goes over and say, hey, I want a new page, okay? Over here, you have your description, your icon. They can choose your template. We'll call this one our tab page. Choose this template, click create, and they would get your navigation, your business logic with areas where they can drop in their information. Okay, so if they need a list of movies, they can drop it over here as a table, for example. Okay, with the title and an overview. Okay, like that. So this is a little bit about Fragment reusability, passing in parameters. Oh, we forgot that the template, okay, if we click the template, it has a parameter, okay, with the parameter that I provided here, and I can say movies, and this would change the title to movies, okay. So this was a little bit about template. We showed you a little bit about the JavaScript code insight. Again, if we go back to the fragment over here and to the action chain we have here, now that we have a variable, if we do $F for fragment, uppercase V would take us into variable, and then uppercase P would take us into the page title, and we can choose this, okay? And this would be the new value over here. So this is, by the way, how you would do if you wanted to do an assignment to a variable, you can just do something equal something else. That's all you need to do. You don't have to use the assign variable action anymore. It's very easy now to use variables in your action chains. And again, this is the code view of the visual view over here. Okay. All right, so we talked about those things. Let's talk about the REST service. Just to show you an example here, I'm gonna pause share for a second, and I'm gonna pick up my demo URL for a REST service that I need to use. Let's pick up this one. Okay, so we'll go back and resume. We'll do a new service connection. Okay, so just like before, you can use the catalog, the API, or defined by endpoint. I'm going to paste the URL for a REST service. And when I click next, what you would see now is that we're taken into the backend creation area. Okay, so we'll call this one the MovieDB backend. Okay, and it's based on this URL that we have over here. Okay, and we can set authentication and what type of cause integration we want to do. And when we click next, we are back into this same process we had before of defining our REST endpoint. Okay, so this is, for example, a search for a movie. Put it here, and we can pass in again parameters over here. There's a query parameter. There's an API key that you need to provide. Let me get the API key from here. Okay. And then we can test, for example, what comes back from our REST service and save as an example. So again, the process is basically the same. One extra step in the wizard, and as a result, you now have a backend called MovieDB with all the definition about the server. You can add all sorts of definition over here, modify, have different configuration for the different life cycle, add headers, for example, and stuff like that. Now, the next time that you come over and add another service connection, okay, if this other service connection is from the same server and basically the same type of backend, okay, once I add it here and I click next, it would automatically recognize the backend. So it won't ask me to create another backend. It's using the backend now instead of the hard-coded URL, and I can basically add another endpoint here. Okay. Like that. Yeah. So this is now two services that are reusing the same backend server over here, the MovieDB. All right. One more thing we wanted to show you. Sorry. While I'm on a page, there's the Audit tab down here. And again, this is now showing me for the currently opened artifacts, everything that I have on here. I can see all the artifacts, would have more. Those things are associated with a specific area. And again, it's very nice to have this ability to say, hey, instead of I'm not working on everything right now, if I'm just working right now on this fragment that I have here, I can just look at the audits for the open artifact and just look at what is wrong with the current page that I'm working on, fix things, for example, that I didn't externalize, and other aspects over here. All right, let's go back to the slides. There's a few new features also coming in to the Visual Builder Studio release, again, coming hopefully toward the end of this month. One aspect is protection at the pipeline level, okay? So in Visual Builder Studio, you can define deployment pipeline or pipeline that invokes several build jobs that do stuff. Up until now, you could have protected the specific build jobs. Now we added the ability to mark specific pipeline as protected. You just go over and you mark them as edit restricted, and you set who is allowed to update or invoke those pipelines. Okay, so this gives you the ability, for example, to control who can run pipelines that deploy to production, for example, and associate it again to specific people or groups in your project. Another enhancement that we added for build jobs and pipelines is a parameter in the build job that indicates who actually started the build job or the pipeline. Okay? And you can refer to this parameter from inside the build job. This, again, based on requests from customers that want, as part of the pipeline, for example, to document who ran the pipeline somewhere. Now they have this access to who started the pipeline. They can use it and push it into some logging system, into some other database somewhere in the backend. We also added other enhancement to the overall build environment. For example, the Docker executor images info now has more information if you're using Docker-based, again, build executors in Visual Builder Studio. Another feature of the Visual Builder Studio is the issue tracking system. Again, if you're not familiar, you get it for free as part of the free Visual Builder Studio if you're an Oracle Cloud customer. And that's a full-blown issue tracking system, similar to things like Bugzilla or Jira. It allows you to document all your to-do, bugs, feature, things you want to work on, assign them to people, do relationship between issues, track the progress of them. We have a whole agile management feature set inside Visual Builder Studio. We're not covering it today. There's a nice new video that shows some of those capabilities on our YouTube channel. One of the things we added to the issue area is the ability to archive issues. Okay, so a lot of people have asked us in the past, can I delete an issue? And the answer was no, because we don't want people that didn't finish the issue that they were working on to just go in and delete the issue, and then nobody knew that the issue was supposed to be resolved. Okay. That being said, there are situations where people mistakenly created an issue or were just trying out something and created an issue that they don't need anymore. So we added a feature now that is called archive. And you can go into an issue, check a checkbox and say, hey, archive this issue. this issue would not show up anymore in all the regular queries that you have here of open issues or closed issues or stuff like that. There is a new query now for archived issues that would show you all the issues that have been archived, and you can then unarchive an issue if you want to bring it back basically from the dead kind of thing. So that is very helpful for keeping your issue tracking cleaner, getting redundant things removed, and disassociating from stuff that you don't need. As you know, Visual Builder Studio is also the environment that is being used to extend Oracle Fusion apps. So 2 new features that are going to be there in the next release in 23.10. One is something called Express Mode. So when you're modifying an existing page in Fusion apps, okay, not creating a new page, but rather taking a page that Oracle created and modifying it, we now have a simplified view, what we call the Express Mode, that allows you to just see an easier view of Visual Builder without all the features, just the features that are dealing with modifying the existing page, things like modifying business rules and stuff like that. That's a view that is available for you, and you can switch between the regular view, which is advanced, and the Express view just by clicking on a button here. So for people who are not developers, for business users who just want to modify a little bit the page, this would make it a lot easier. Another feature that we did the work for is the ability to have a VB Studio instance associated with every Fusion pod that you have. So up until now, you only had one VB Studio instance associated with one of your Fusion app environment, usually with the test environment, but you could move it to dev. From that Visual Builder Studio, you could have developed on each one of the Fusion environment you had, but you could have deployed to each one of the environment, but people sometimes wanted to have easier access from other environments. So we did the work on our side on the VB Studio. It's going to be released in 23.10. The little thing to know here is that in order to be able to use this on all your environments, you would need to be provisioned with the Fusion as a service architecture. This is going to happen for all the new Fusion instances. The plan is in 23, so in the next Fusion release. And over time, we're going to roll this update to existing customers, and you'll be able to get this ability to spin up basically Visual Builder Studio or access Visual Builder Studio from each one of your Fusion environment also. All right, so that's a quick summary of the features in 23.10. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them right now on the Q&A panel. I'll mention a few resources for learning stuff. Of course, our documentation has a what's new section to it with links to specific documentation on each one of the new features, and of course, documentation on everything that you can do in Visual Builder. As always, we publish a lot of blog entries that cover those new features on our blog at blogs.oracle.com/vbcs. We have our Cloud Customer Connect forum where you can ask technical questions, how to, if you're running into issues, if you don't know how to use something, that's the place to ask questions. You can get to it, by the way, if you go in Visual Builder, under the top menu on the right side, there's an access to our forum, and you can go over there and ask your questions. Us product managers are over there monitoring and answering questions. And one more important thing, we have the Visual Builder LinkedIn group. We crossed the 1,250 users a couple of weeks back, and we would love you to join us there if you're on LinkedIn. One of the nice things about this group is everyone can post in there. We post about every new event, blog entry, how-to, documentation lab, everything new that we create. We put a post in there so you can go over the history and look it up. You can also do a search. We also have a lot of members of our community posting there. There's a couple of posts, for example, from Sharif, one of our Oracle aces, about, for example, how to work with zip files in Visual Builder, and a few other examples out there. So if you're not already a member of our LinkedIn group, go into LinkedIn, do a search at the top for Visual Builder. You'll find our group, click join, and join our growing community of developers. All right, let's see if we have some questions we want to answer. About notification about the upgrade. Yes, so again, depending on which environment you're working on and which update window you are on, you're going to get the update. I believe Oracle Integration Cloud Wave 1, what they call, already went out. This is, for example, how I got the update on my environment. Wave 2 is delayed again a couple of weeks after that. You'll get a notification about it. If you're on a VB standalone, I know that Wave 1, some of the emails went out over the weekend, I believe. So you probably also got an update if you're on the Wave 1 window. If your instance is marked as Wave 2, then again, it would be a couple of weeks after we update Wave 1. Which features go into VB quarterly maintenance? It's basically the same feature of VB are going over into all the releases at the same month, basically. So we're doing an August release, okay? And from this point on, every new instance that you create is going to have those new features, and upgrades are done based on the window, okay? So that's how you get the new features. VB Studio in each FA pod, does prod instance come with VB Studio? No, it's only for dev and test. Okay, so that's this thing. Again, one thing to distinct between VB Studio and Visual Builder, those are two separate things. VB Studio is just the design time. You need to deploy into a runtime. The runtime is either Fusion Apps or a Visual Builder runtime or an Oracle Integration Cloud. So depending on what you want to do, if you just want to create extensions that extend an existing Fusion page or add a new page in Fusion Apps, okay, then you don't need Visual Builder's the runtime. But if you want to create your own business object, access external REST services, run outside of Fusion Apps, have access to non-Fusion app customers, then you do still need a VB instance. We had an office hour about Visual Builder Studio, the previous one, basically. It's on our YouTube playlist. I would highly recommend watching it to understand the difference between Visual Builder and Visual Builder Studio. In case of multiple VB studios, all of these share Git to access code base. Yeah, you can actually add multiple users from multiple VB studios into the same project to work on the same Git repository. Is there any restriction on the number of apps we can create with the new OIM migration from IDCS? That's actually a question to the IDCS guys on whether they are putting any restrictions on the number of applications you can create. Again, it kind of depends usually on the license that you have. I believe that with Fusion Apps, you get something like 6 apps by default, but you can increase it. Again, talk to the IDCS guys if you have any further questions there. All right, and I believe that's all the questions we had here. I know that Blaine answered a couple more. Again, remember, for the next couple of weeks, you can still get free training and run through the certification training for VB and Redwood. So we highly recommend that you take advantage of it. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you learned some new things. Hopefully you'll enjoy our new features. If you have ideas for new features that you would like to see, let us know on our discussion forum, and we'll be happy to consider them. Thanks everyone and have a great day.